unimmerse yourself from VR. Step out of the headset, you can do it. Hello and welcome to this edition of Augmenting Reality Meetup. We are hosted by the lovely team at Amplified Robots, the lovely Steve Dan. The team back there, wave your hands, Amplified Robots, everybody knows who you are. Well, okay, they've dispersed. They've now dispersed. Some of them are down here and some of them are over there. Basically, if you want to speak to anybody, they're all here in the room. We are today talking about hardware. Before we do that, a couple of things that I'm going to mention because I know that YouTube, Facebook, and everybody else online is over there. I'm going to say hello, Kashmira, because I promised I would say hello to people who couldn't make it. And I want to also mention a couple of dates of things that are coming up. Previously, we've talked about the VR Writers' Room, and the VR Writers' Room edition in September, the workshop that's happening with Immerse UK, is now live. So if you are interested and you want to participate, please come and find me afterwards, and I will give you the link to be able to register for the VR Writers' Room, which is happening on the 8th of September at Sky. If you are interested in the automotive industry and you want to get involved in automotive and VR, then please come and talk to me because we have an event on Friday which is being hosted in partnership with the DE&TC. So if you want to get involved with the automotive industry, pretty much most of them will be there. So please come and talk to me about that if you're interested. Also, Mr. Dan has an event happening with PwC on the 8th of August. So if you want to go along to that one, 10th? Jeremy said 8th. Am I wrong? Is it 10th or 8th? He's going to confirm. In August, there will be an event over at PwC as well. So feel free to come along to that one, which will be a showcase, again, of hardware and technology at the lovely new space over at PwC. So if you haven't seen it already, you should pop along over there. They have lots of lovely hardware for you to toy around with. But today, we are joined by the lovely Niall from Daiquiri, who is going to be talking us through what Daiquiri are up to at the moment. But in case you hadn't noticed, it's a bit hard to miss. There's some lovely hardware here, and I did promise those folks who turned up you would get a chance to play with this hardware, and Niall is going to keep that promise, correct?
Whoa, okay. Thank you very much. I'd be interested in that automotive kind of event, by the way. Okay, good evening. Thank you very much for kind of coming to this kind of presentation here this evening. I'm the territory manager for Daiquiri. Looking after all business development activities in the EMEA North region, so including the UK and Ireland. So I'm here today to talk about how augmented reality, and specifically augmented reality wearables, are going to change the kind of the workplace of the future. So normally at this stage I ask people, is everybody familiar with what augmented reality is? Whoa, cue stage lights.
Sorry. They can't see you online.
My swarthy good looks. Anyway, so everybody familiar with augmented reality? Okay, I'm getting thumbs up. You know, the overlay of kind of, getting lots of thumbs up. The overlay of digital content on the real world. So I think the most kind of relevant or the most widely known example of that is Pokemon Go. So I'm here to talk to you about Pokemon Go, except in practical industrial applications. So just as a starter, a little video.
An amazing amount of technology in this. This is truly different.
The helmet is allowing the wearer to overlay maps, schematics, thermal images to see effectively the walls and pipes and other solid objects.
It's about augmenting people, and the smart helmet is an entirely new type of human-machine interface. We designed it so that workers can see more, know more, learn on the fly, collaborate with workers on the other side of the globe, have the sensors they need to extend the human capabilities and to do what they do best, and that is be creative problem solvers.
Okay, so a little bit about the company itself. So we were founded in 2013 with augmented reality as our focus from day one. We deliver professional grade AR through our kind of platform that we've developed. So this is kind of our core competencies are based around kind of computer vision, our own proprietary visual operating system, kind of a series of kind of developer tools, kick-ass developer tools, and we're very much focused on the kind of the user experience when it comes to actually using the kind of augmented reality. So this platform that we provide, it's kind of leveraged in different kind of form factors, some of which you'll see here today, and some of which I'll talk about a little bit further on in this presentation. So our vision as a company is augmented reality everywhere. So in 5 to 10 years' time, augmented reality is going to become kind of a lot more commonplace in kind of everyday life. So if you're familiar with kind of a TV program called kind of Black Mirror, there's lots of interesting episodes, but there's one in particular which kind of projects a vision of the future in which kind of augmented reality is embedded into a lens. So season 3, episode 1. I'd advise you to kind of go look at it, check it out if you haven't seen it already. But in the near term, it's going to be big industry that's going to be driving this adoption of the technology and kind of what work fundamentally. So there are applications out there already of augmented reality in industry. You have companies using them in applications for such as warehousing. So being able to guide kind of a person in pick and place type activities. But there are many more companies now who are starting to explore the possibilities around things like kind of manufacturing and maintenance, and using augmented reality as an aid kind of for both. I think that the benefits of using augmented reality over say kind of traditional methods of work, I think that they are well understood, but not necessarily well proven. So we're talking about things like performance efficiencies, kind of error reduction, accelerated training, and enhanced safety. I think a lot of people are kind of saying, yeah, we want to try and adopt this technology, but we're not really sure where to start. So I'll have an example later of a client we've worked with where we already have we're getting good feedback from the field as to how and where this type of technology can be deployed. So as much as technology, process, improvement have created kind of unprecedented efficiency in the workplace, there's still one fundamental weakness when it comes to any complex industrial kind of system, and that is human fallibility. So kind of human error, it's a kind of a massive kind of waste stream on a global scale, and one which traditional technologies have been unable to solve. So we believe that augmented reality and DAQRI have the power to kind of change all of that. So it's about being able to provide kind of the right information in the right context at the right time to the wearer to make them more efficient at what they're doing, the task in hand. So you can imagine in a couple of years' time, where a technician in a kind of an industrial plant scenario, he's going out to kind of maintain or fix a particular piece of equipment or asset. So he won't even have to kind of to bring the information specific to that asset with him. He won't even have to go looking for it. It'll effectively be there. You've got this connected device that can connect into existing disparate data systems, and you can basically pull that information onto your wearable in context. So that could be operational data, maintenance history, standard operating procedures, and again, some of the work that we're doing already is kind of around some of these type of activities. So what are the different form factors we make available for our kind of platform? Well, we have the wearable products. We have the kind of the smart helmet and the smart glasses. And again, I've kind of got kind of slides for those on their own. We also, as a company, we have a kind of an in-car head-up display technology. So again, basically projecting augmented content onto the dashboard and or onto the windscreen, and this technology has already been installed in hundreds of thousands of Jaguar Land Rovers already, and we're talking to some of the large kind of OEM car manufacturers about integrating it into their next kind of generation car designs. Just on the very right here, we've recently announced a kind of a handheld companion trackpad device for the smart wearables, which we're calling Omni. So this can help to provide a more robust interaction with your augmented content. So again, you don't have ambiguous kind of hand gestures. That it's kind of far more robust mechanism for actually interacting with augmented content. So so I can kind of watch this space. So so that's just a little bit of a kind of a summary of the products. So I'm going to talk a little bit. I first want to, before I kind of jump into some of the actual kind of products themselves, I'm going to talk. God, this would be so much easier with a clicker. Kind of about the note to Tanya. I talk about. No, that's okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the DAQRI product ecosystem and software stack. So I'm actually going to just kind of get all of this up at once. Damn you, animations. So you have the kind of the different hardware devices, and they're all running they're all running the DAQRI kind of visual operating system. And again, that's common across all of the various devices. So the idea being that assets or applications you build on one, you can deploy on others. What else? We have a kind of a public API available that allows access to the kind of the raw data from the various different sensors on the actual kind of device themselves. So for creating your own kind of content, we have a series of kind of core up at the top there. We do for the wearable devices, the smart glasses, the smart helmet. We have a series of out-of-the-box core applications that without necessarily any customization, you're able to use kind of from day one. So things like a kind of a HTML5 compatible browser. A kind of an application we call Remote Expert, so providing that kind of first-party kind of shared view where someone anywhere else in the world can dial into the device, see what the wearer is seeing, give them voice guidance, give them additional visual cues in the augmented reality domain. With the helmet specifically, we've integrated a FLIR, a thermal camera, and I'll come back to that in a little while as to one of the applications we have around that. So in addition to this, we've built out a kind of an ecosystem of software products as well. So we've created a kind of a wrapper within the Unity developer environment for the smart devices. So you can use Unity to to build applications specific to the kind of the smart devices. So and I think most, if not all, of our early adopters are using this as the mechanism to generate kind of custom content. And we also provide kind of enterprise kind of grade support. So ultimately, we're about kind of world domination. We want one on every head. 10 years time, everybody here looking at me with a DAQRI device. So if within a kind of an enterprise or industrial scenario, that you need to have a kind of a back-end kind of support mechanism to be able to track devices and wearers. So we also provide a kind of a facility for that as well. So let's have a look at the kind of the wearable form factors in a little bit more detail. So, ta-da, show and tell. So this is a wearable human-machine interface. So you've got a kind of a see-through kind of holographic display that overlays the augmented content. It's powered by an Intel M7 device, so it's the same type or kind of level of processing you get in a kind of like a Surface Pro. So again, so that coupled with the kind of the sensor suite, the kind of the forward-looking cameras provides the kind of the platform for augmented reality. So and again, just a word about the processing power. So what we're seeing typically in applications such as say construction, where you've got these complex kind of model or BIM files that you want to be able to render. There's no kind of decimation required to be able to do that with the kind of the DAQRI device as well. So. So it's a connected device, so it can function as an end node in a kind of an existing IT infrastructure. So if you think about it in those terms, we provide a platform on which you can build your applications. So so you can push kind of pull real-time information from existing data sources. First and foremost, it's a safety device. So it's PPE certified as a kind of a hard hat and a safety glasses as well. So anywhere where you can go today with with the safety glasses, with a hard hat, you can go with the DAQRI device as well. So again, when it comes to the industrial workspace, you need to have those certifications to be able to take this onto a real job site. And yeah, so I think that's a little bit about that. And so more recently, and again, we've repackaged the we've had the helmet available, commercially available as a kind of a developer kit since November last year. And so what we've done, based on feedback from the market, is we've repackaged the kind of the technology, the sensor suite, the lenses into a lightweight glasses form factor. So the kind of credit our kind of marketing boffins, the Daiquiri smart glasses. The difference here is what we've done is we've offboarded the processing and the power. So this is a kind of a single kind of integrated device. What we've done is we've kind of taken that out and kind of put it onto the processing and power onto a kind of a separate hip-mounted device. So that can kind of, just in terms of kind of bearing that weight, it's easier to bear that on the hip than it is on the head. Another advantage of this kind of modular design is that you can plug the glasses into a kind of a workstation or a desktop running the Daiquiri kind of operating system. So you can take advantage of the processing and the graphics from a kind of a desktop environment as well. So again, just handling kind of complex or rendering of kind of much more complex model files. You can do that with the kind of the glasses and a kind of a desktop type device. So yeah, I've mentioned the weight. So it's 320 grams for in terms of the actual absolute weight. So again, it's a lot more comfortable than, say, the kind of the helmet design. Again, different applications, different industries, will want different kind of form factors. So that's why we have them both kind of available. So we've also integrated on this a kind of a fingerprint kind of recognition device as well. So as a kind of a login mechanism as well. So to the actual device itself. So it's kind of an interesting kind of feature of the smart glasses as well. So okay, so one of the kind of exciting kind of services that we're making available for the wearables, so the helmet and the glasses, is environmental mapping. So there is a depth sensing, a stereo depth sensing camera. It's an Intel RealSense device built into the devices themselves, and with this, you're able to do environmental mapping. So I suppose fundamentally it allows the wearer to create a kind of a 3D mesh of their environment. And there is the possibility then to kind of fuse the information from, say, the color camera, or even in the case of the helmet, the thermal camera, and to create kind of like heat maps or kind of photorealistic kind of renderings of a particular environment. So that's going there. Yeah, it is. So here's an example of the 3D environmental mapping process in action. So you can see the wearer basically, so this is a kind of like a third-party view of that. So we have a companion app on it sits on your kind of laptop. So kind of you can have both first-party, third-party views. And you can basically, you can look at that kind of particular snapshot at any point in time, go forward, go backwards. So again, I suppose why would you want this type of application, or why is this important? Well, you may have your own ideas, but what we're seeing is a kind of an application in a kind of like maybe an industrial plant scenario, is whereby you can merge this mapping capability with the output of the thermal camera to create a kind of a thermal map of an environment, and use that as a kind of like an inspection application, whereby you can, as part of an inspection round, kind of look at the same area, and you can monitor trends in kind of or changes in heat over time. So it kind of gives you a predictive maintenance kind of capability. If you see something trending upwards in time, well, okay, maybe it's kind of some sort of errant behavior, but it allows you to kind of take action before something kind of breaks, essentially. So that's basically provides predictive maintenance capability based on trend analysis. So talked a little bit about who we are, what we can provide. So I'm going to turn my attention now to some of our client-related activities. So here's a selector of our kind of early adopters and partners. So everything from industrial assembly to kind of viewing of kind of model information on a construction site, to using the device for surgical training. So I think that's quite apt given some of the people here today. So I'm going to focus on one of the applications, namely a pilot study we ran with Siemens Power Division earlier on this year. So Daiquiri, we worked with Siemens to create an application to see whether augmented reality could help to improve hands-on training when it came to the assembly of a kind of a gas turbine. So just give you an idea on timescales, we first visited Siemens last June as a kind of a scoping exercise. and we were in a position to trial by April. So it's kind of like a 9-month cycle from kind of start to finish here. So, and that's everything from speccing the requirements to developing to deploying and testing on site. So again, learning to service one of these turbines, it's no easy task. It's actually, it's quite hard, and they're not cheap. You know, the kind of the high-end kind of gas turbines sell for, you know, kind of like, I think $300 million a kind of a pop or something like that. So to be certified as a turbine kind of fitter or an assembly kind of technician, it takes kind of 3 years with 3 months of kind of classroom-based training. And even after that, that's kind of predicated on having a kind of a mechanical engineering degree in the first place. So we ask ourselves, so can we use AR to improve the training of the turbine fitters? So you've got a large complex piece of machinery. So big question related to AR. So I suppose how do you eat an elephant? Well, we narrowed the challenge to focus on one key task, which was the assembly of these a kind of a burner. So these are so burners are kind of where fuel is injected to basically kind of like basically drive the kind of the shaft, which kind of generates electricity through the generator. So there's over a dozen of these on a kind of a typical gas turbine. So this is quite a common task when it comes to fitting and installing a kind of a gas turbine. So we built a kind of an augmented reality application to address the challenges associated with this particular task. So it had 3 main components. So one was a kind of a 3D model, which kind of had assembly animation, so showing you an animation of the kind of each step in the process, but it was also interactive in that you could kind of manipulate it to see the kind of like the actual kind of piece of equipment from kind of from different sides. There was a kind of on the right there was this kind of text viewer, which again kind of showed you where you were in the actual process itself. So you could see, you know, how far along you were, and it kind of gives you an idea of where you are. And then in the middle we have what we call our kind of smart menu, which is the what the technician uses to actually control the application as they start working through it. So you know, it's in addition to you know, kind of signing off on each step, this effectively kind of helped to kind of build up the kind of the audit trail as they did that that particular task. And I do have an example of this application, so we can all become kind of burner fitters after the presentation here today. So yeah, but I do have an example of this running on the helmet, so I'll be able to show that to you afterwards. So we had 4 users try out the app on the smart helmet and use it to guide them through the process. So we had 2 novices who had never actually done the kind of the process before. We actually had the author of the kind of the work instruction who hadn't done it in kind of several years, so he acted as the kind of the refresher. And we had 1 expert who was the person who actually trained the others in the this particular activity. So somebody who was kind of doing it quite often, quite regularly. So we kind of timed each participant, and you can see from the results there that they were kind of more or less in the kind of the same ballpark when it came to kind of carrying out the task, despite kind of varying levels of kind of expertise. So now, if we kind of took another look at the data, you know, if we focused on the average time a kind of a novice kind of previously took to kind of learn and complete this task for the first time, and you know, this essentially this would have previously taken them the bones of a day. So you know, they'd have to kind of they'd have classroom-based kind of activities, then they'd kind of have to learn the process, kind of discuss it, and eventually they were able to kind of be in a position to do it. So that particular process or task kind of took the kind of the bones of kind of a day. So essentially with AR, it's an order of magnitude less. So I suppose that what's really kind of remarkable is that the knowledge can be applied straight away. So that there's, you know, it's very much focused on the-job learning. So I suppose it doesn't necessarily say that a kind of a technician can kind of learn this from the off in 45 minutes, but it kind of opens the opportunity to really look at that kind of three-month training activity and kind of really kind of compress it. I suppose one of the side benefits of this is that, you know, whereas previously you might need kind of one-to-one kind of oversight, you don't necessarily need that anymore. So again, it frees up the kind of the trainer's time as well. So that's kind of like a side benefit of this type of kind of activity as well. So we also wanted to address more than pure performance. So so we looked at kind of end users, the people who are actually going to use this technology. You need to create buy-in from a kind of an early stage. So we use this SUS, this kind of system usability scale, to kind of determine, look at the perceptions in terms of actually using the kind of the technology. So there are there's two critical thresholds on this particular kind of score chart, and the first one is a kind of a score of 68 out of 100, and so that means any score over that, the user finds the technology easier than average to use. If it goes above 80, it's going to be something that they're going to actively push themselves to for the organization to adopt. So you can see here in terms of the results, when it comes to the kind of the novices and the refresher, that that they'd look to drive this into the organization rather than the kind of the other approach, the kind of the management top-down approach as well. And even with the kind of the expert, that's kind of that there was support for the application. So really, kind of based on the case study as a whole, here's what we took away. So kind of incredible, I think, kind of process efficiencies when it came to actually kind of getting from a kind of a novice to a particular kind of competence level in terms of actually performing this task. We saw a kind of a great confidence in the technology from all the users who partook in the study. And the last learning, like throughout the whole process, not a single error in the assembly process. So it's kind of the refresher even noted that he was reminded himself, by stepping through this process linearly, he remembered, oh yeah, there's this kind of a step in there which I wouldn't necessarily have remembered. So so really that's it. So that's really what I kind of want to talk to you about today. And Tanya, I am finished now, and I know I ran a little bit over. So thank you for joining. Are there any questions? Oh. A couple of hands going up there. That's always good. Nothing too hard now.
Got microphones that refuse to work. So, first of all, on the live stream, hello Heather, and hello Canada, and I can't remember who else was watching, sorry. Any questions in the room?
Hi Heather, hi Canada.
Hi, great presentation. I'm familiar a little bit with HoloLens. So again, I'm sure you're getting this quite a lot. I'm going to compare with HoloLens. What is the field of view? Because you haven't spoken at all about the user experience.
No, that is a good question. I should have touched on that when I was talking about the devices themselves. The kind of the metric is 44 degrees on the diagonal. So again, come talk to me afterwards, and we'll have a beer, and we'll talk about the kind of a more direct comparison with the kind of the Holos.
Okay.
The user experience at the moment, we've adopted a kind of a gaze and dwell approach to interacting with the augmented content. So essentially, you can interact with it through kind of like having a kind of like a reticle which you control through head movement. So we've deliberately stayed away from kind of gesture control. So if you're in an industrial environment, you might be wearing gloves, or you need your hand to actually perform some sort of a manual task. And we've created this kind of this omni device, this kind of companion device for the wearable itself. So where they are both kind of positionally aware of each other. There's kind of like this, it's kind of like it's a kind of a little surface trackpad with kind of micro gesture integration. So that's how we're looking at beyond, say, the kind of the gaze and dwell. That this is the kind of the next generation of kind of being able to input into the device. One of the I can see you're like to ask another question.
Voice
just before
command,
you get there,
voice command.
We have integrated a on at least one of our kind of trials. We've just basically had kind of Google's voice to text API running on top of it as well. So when it comes to it's kind of gaze and dwell is fine if it's kind of yes no type questions, but then okay, I need to add some supplementary information into my kind of inspection report. So we've trialed that already with kind of just Google's voice to text API running on the device itself as well. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. And the cost?
The big question.
What is this? Special discount? No. So as I say, blatant sales plug up there, that there is the kind of an online shop for the glasses themselves. So that's you can go onto the actual kind of the shop itself. It's there. It's for kind of small quantities. It's $4,995. For the helmet, as a kind of an individual, kind of a single unit, kind of developer kind of kit, it's $15,000.
Basically, pull together and find other friends who want to buy one. There's a question in the center of the room.
Yeah. In larger environments, how do you map different objects around a large room? Like, so you do the mapping of a static thing while you're looking at it, but in the examples, it may have just been the show reel, they're showing like people moving around large environments and interacting with different things mapped in that world. So how do you do that?
Okay, so it's a good question. I suppose there's maybe two parts to that. So the kind of the environmental mapping capability, that's like there's a kind of a limitation on the distance that you can use that. I think that's of the camera itself. I think it's up to I think it's 3 to 4 meters. So when you're actually moving around and creating that kind of 3D mesh, that's kind of like you have to be within a certain distance of objects. When it comes to just so say for instance, I have a kind of a gas turbine, and I'm going out to service that piece of equipment, and I'm not bringing a manual with me. I'm going to go out there. What you can do is you can within the augmented domain, you can do a kind of a one-time calibration where you would have like a kind of almost like a kind of a virtual tag that sits above it, and as you gaze on that, it pulls you up all the real time. It could pull up the kind of the status information. So you would, it's not really necessarily mapping. It's kind of more of a kind of a configuration for a particular environment that allows you then afterwards to so in the show reel that you saw, so it knows like. I suppose you have to kind of train the device as to where it's going to be. So it is positionally aware, but you need to give it a kind of a kind of a reference point, and kind of you can it can build up its own breadcrumb trail from there. So so I kind of almost done like a kind of a one-time calibration or configuration.
Hi, just a question, more sort of nitty-gritty question. How do you keep the electronics in the helmet in particular cool? Imagine you've got a lot of body heat as well as you might be in a hot industrial environment. What do you do about that?
Yes, it's kind of a valid question, and you should have been around for some of the prototype kind of helmets. We have what we've actually done is that this kind of this acts as a kind of a heat sink. We've incorporated a kind of a series of kind of brushless kind of magnetic fans in the back there as well. So like the goal with the kind of like the production version is that no part in the helmet should ever be above kind of 45 Celsius, and that's going to be on the outside as well, where the heat's being wicked away. So yeah, it's kind of like and again, it comes down to kind of I suppose kind of power optimization of the actual kind of the processor, the sensors running on the actual device itself. So I wouldn't. I can go back to you on that. I wouldn't be able to talk specifics, but that's ultimately that's one way we're doing it, and that's kind of our target with the actual device itself.
Hi. How long does a battery life last on the helmet?
Okay. At the moment, we so that's a kind of a lithium-ion battery that just basically plugs into the device. Running full tilt at the moment, we're getting between again probably about 2 to 3 hours with a single battery. It is kind of it's got 2 of them there, so it is kind of replaceable. Like the goal when we've done that kind of power optimization task is that a kind of a single battery should last a kind of a shift up to 8 hours, and we're not changing the battery at all. That's about how we're kind of optimizing the actual kind of device itself to kind of minimize the power draw. And so that's why it's good that we're in control of our own kind of operating system on the actual devices itself. So.
Hi. So how do you register holograms with physical objects, and do you have any data on the registration error, so how much they move after you put them there?
So for instance, I think that the kind of the 3D mapping functionality, that's accurate to within a couple of centimeters. Once it's so I suppose kind of traditional kind of AR is done with kind of 2D marker. It's kind of where you'd anchor some sort of an experience to a marker. With the positional tracking, So, giving it a kind of a landmark or a single kind of point of reference, and then going off and anchoring content around that. So basically, one of the metrics you use to kind of track the accuracy of what you're actually rendering is loop closure. So with the helmet, I think that we're getting I think it's 0.25% is the kind of the loop closure metric. So you walk kind of 100 meters in a kind of a circle, the helmet thinks it's within 25 centimeters plus or minus of the original kind of starting point. So it's accurate to a point. It's not going to be able to kind of help at the moment at least kind of an aircraft technician to kind of drill a hole to millimeter precision. It's not quite there yet in terms of the tracking, but it's good enough for kind of a lot of kind of maintenance and inspection type activities where you just maybe need a kind of like a kind of companion kind of animation rather than actually locking the actual content to the device itself.
Hi. Yeah, to that point, is the positional tracking the main differentiator hardware-wise than a really cheap solution like a Gear VR or a modified Vive?
To be honest, I'm not a kind of a big, kind of huge, kind of VR kind of person. I think it's one of our core competencies is the VIO technology, is the kind of what we call visual inertial odometry. So that the helmet's ability to track the wearer's pose through a combination of there's a kind of an industrial grade inertial measurement unit built into the device and kind of a wide angle tracking camera. And so when it comes to kind of using this in a kind of an industrial facility, you don't want to have necessarily kind of instrument every single asset with markers. You just want maybe a single point of kind of reference. So that its ability to track its own kind of position accurately is, I suppose, it is one of our kind of, I suppose, key selling points. Kind of one of the things that does kind of set us apart. There are other kind of aspects of the technology as well, which I think would kind of, well, at least I'm going to say it, kind of keep us ahead of the kind of the other devices, the other kind of AR devices that are on the market as well. So, by the way, if any kind of technical questions where I've kind of basically fudged an answer, just send them to me, and I'll get someone a little bit more informed to kind of to give up kind of a proper. I'm serious. Or if anybody, the kind of the case study as well, we have a kind of a published paper on that as well. So if anybody wants a copy of that, just kind of send me an email as well. So.
Okay, what is the refresh rate of the display? Did people feel motion sickness while wearing the helmet for a long time? You say.
The feedback I'm getting at least is that you wouldn't necessarily get the same kind of sensation as you would if you were completely immersed with kind of virtual reality. The refresh rate, I think we're running the kind of about 60 hertz at the moment, but that can go up to kind of 90 hertz. So that kind of what we call the kind of the motion to photon kind of delay rate. I think at the moment it's about kind of, I think we're running at about maybe 40 milliseconds. We're looking to kind of get that down to kind of 10 milliseconds. So like when you try it here now, you'll be able to, we'll anchor a kind of an object in space, and you'll be able to walk around it, and you'll be able to kind of experience it for yourself. I think that to my mind at least, I don't think you get that kind of same sensation, and that it wouldn't serve our purposes if if everybody was getting sick when they put on their device.
Okay.
Great, thanks, Niall.
Thank you very much, Niall. Yank that off and just leave it on the table for me. So for those of you who are probably about to try and run away, I will remind you that you will get a chance to play with the hardware if you stick around to the end. So that is the deal. You have to stick around to the end, and then you can get to play with things. Please form an orderly queue. Try not to mob Niall, and that would be great. In the meantime, next up we have the illustrious Mr. Steve Dan, who is going to be sharing with us some more wonderful insights.
Right. Thank you. Oh, I'm okay on my tap. Okay. Welcome, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I think there are a few new people here today. I'm Steve Dan. I'm the founder and CEO of Amplified Robot. Amplified Robot's been in augmented reality space for 10 years and virtual reality space for over 5 years. So Amplified Robot, go onto our website, have a look at what we do. If you want to sort of contact me, it's just steve.dan@amplifiedrobot.com. I also have the privilege of actually running another virtual reality company called Medical Realities. And that's a spin-off because we found out that virtual reality is going to be fantastic for training purposes. And we're actually starting off by using virtual reality to train medical students to become surgeons. And I'm very lucky as well to be the co-president of the London chapter of the VR and AR Association. The VR and AR Association has been going for 2 years, and we've already got 4,000 company members worldwide. You don't have to be a company to join. You can actually join as an individual as well. It's got really great things you get from it because you get a lot of resources. You also get plugged into a network of over 4,000 companies and literally thousands of people as well. So it's great for collaborating on projects both in this country but also abroad. But tonight I was going, I've got my charming assistant here who's actually going to change the slides. So this is Archie, our little robot. So VR and AR hardware wars. I'm actually going to talk specifically about where we've got to from here. So we've got Oculus Rift, we've got the Sony PlayStation VR, we've got the HTC Vive. So those are the head-mounted display ones that are actually tethered headsets. Now obviously we've got Google Daydream now, and we've also got Google Daydream No. 2, which is a completely standalone device that actually doesn't need a mobile phone to go inside it. So that's about to sort of hit the market towards the end of this year. Samsung Gear, that's the latest version of the Samsung Gear with a controller. Samsung are also rumoured to be bringing out a standalone head-mounted device that actually doesn't have their phone in it either. And it's interesting to note in that fact that the Samsung have also signed up to Google Daydream, so Samsung phones working Google Daydream headsets as well. Now we had a sort of question about sort of crossovers between VR and AR, and we've got things here like the Microsoft VR. This is a Hewlett-Packard headset, but Lenovo and Asus are also going to make headsets. And they're going to be sort of crossover devices because they are both designed to be partly virtual reality or AR or mixed reality, as they like to call it, because they obviously love the HoloLens, and HoloLens is part of what they do. So that's where they started off. But of course, what's happened just recently is that Apple have shown their hand as to what they're going to do. And they've taken a long time to actually say they're actually going to officially come into AR and VR markets. Now, there's a lot of things happening, and what I'm going to tell you is stuff that I've gleaned from various sources, all of them totally unofficial, okay? So none of this comes directly from Apple, but it comes from people that actually know a lot about what Apple are doing and also what's happening in China. So we've been able to piece a few things together, and I think it's actually sort of quite exciting. We've got some things, they've got, obviously Apple file literally hundreds and hundreds of patents all the time. This is their patent for something which looks extremely close to me from a sort of VR headset device using a phone which goes in the front. But also using their new phone, it could be an AR device as well. We'll get on to why that could be in a second. So as I say, they do lots of things. So they've also got Apple patents. This is positioning patents that they've got there for where you can actually sort of put stuff in front of things, but also you can put it behind things so it's occluded as well. So they've got lots and lots. They've been building up patents for this for about the last probably 5 years or so, specifically in this space. This is the sort of main one. This is the one, the VR one, it's a slightly more sophisticated version of the simple one I showed you earlier. This is just a flow chart for actually sort of how they actually figure out how the AR is going to work with inside the devices. And you can actually glean quite a lot from these patents. Now, some of the patents they're just putting out there just as protection. They don't necessarily need to go exactly the same way that the patents say they're going to go. They just want to protect themselves just to make sure that they are not going to get sort of sidelined by somebody else coming up and actually patenting something that they're going to do, which of course does happen. although in America now, it's actually getting a lot tougher to actually sort of start to, on patents. It used to be that you could virtually patent anything and claim that you'd actually patent it. So somebody came up with the idea of, actually somebody patented a door and somebody else patented a chair. And they actually hold patents for a door and a chair. So anybody, in theory, they can go after anybody that makes doors or actually makes chairs. Right, the new set of iPhones. We always thought that Apple were going to make something very special because this year is the 10th anniversary of the launch of the iPhone. And in actual fact, when the iPhone was launched, it was slightly different from the way it actually turned out because originally I've actually met a couple of the people that actually designed and worked on the original iPhone. And their original designs were they had parallel teams working on different designs. So one of the iPhone's ideas, which they came out, was from the iPod. And I don't know if you remember, the iPod had a sort of circular dial. They were going to use that as a dial for the phone. So that was one of the ideas that they came up with. So thank goodness they actually didn't go down that route. But it took them an awful lot of time before they actually figured it out. But the one reason they actually did it was at a dinner party, Steve Jobs was buttonholed by a Microsoft executive who wouldn't stop talking about how Microsoft were going to own mobile phones. They were going to be the leader in mobile phones for the next 20 years. And the next day he came in, he seethed about it all night. And the next day he came into the office and said, right, we're going to make a phone. And we're going to make it better than anybody else. So that day, he took everybody else working on every other project in Apple and got them working on a phone. So that's how the iPhone sort of started off. And when it first started off, I would argue that one of the things which made iPhones extremely popular were the apps. Now, originally, they didn't want to put third-party apps on the phones. They just wanted to put Apple apps on the phones. So they were going to bar everybody else. The idea was that you couldn't actually put an app on the phone. It was only after they relented from that, and in actual fact, I'd argue that something that drove the iPhone with all the third-party apps. And of course, it's a great product for them because all they have to do is they have the portal where you can put the app on, and they take 30% of any money that is made from that app. Of course, and they collect it, and then they distribute it. So they actually do quite a bit to do that, but it's really almost for them now money for nothing. Now, the iPhone 8, it's actually going to be in 3 different devices. I'm tempted to say small, medium, and large, almost like that. There's going to be a standard version, a pretty good version, but a super version, the iPhone 8 Plus. And it's the iPhone 8 Plus, which is, I think, something that's going to interest anybody that's in AR or VR space, because it's designed to work in AR and VR space. One of the things that actually makes it different is because it's going to be the screen. The screen is actually going to be a lot better than the screen. The actual iPhones now don't really work that well in devices like Google Daydream because the screens on the iPhones right now are designed to be read 3 feet away. So you can look at it there and it works perfectly. But when you put it there, it doesn't work that well. So it's going to be brighter, it's going to be sharper, it's going to be bigger. And also the screen goes right the way to the edge of the phone. So there's going to be hardly anywhere where there's anything apart from that. So the whole phone is going to be the screen. Now, I should have asked, who's got iPhones here tonight? How many people? Right, okay, that's interesting because I think we find that most people in tech will probably have an iPhone that they have for personal use. But it's interesting Can anybody guess who's making the screens for the new Apple phones? Samsung, yeah. So they might be enemies, but in certain cases, they're frenemies as well. So and so any Apple phone is made up of a huge amount of different content and products. And that's actually one of the things that, for instance, Steve Cook was actually brilliant at doing. He's brilliant at actually sourcing and making sure that all the product gets to the manufacturers so they can all be made at the same time. So he was brilliant at that. So he's actually sort of very, very instrumental in how well the iPhone has been put together and how well it works. Now, they've also upped the GPU as well to make it faster. But they've also added extra things on it. They've actually done more work on sophistication of the accelerometers and the gyroscopes as well to make it better. But of course, their main sort of coup was probably buying a really, really good AR company. That company was a German company called Mateo. They bought it 2 years ago. And I think arguably Mateo produced some of the best AR SDKs out there. And if you were making AR product like we were, thankfully we actually weren't using the Mateo SDKs for any of the work we were working on or for any of our clients, because when Apple bought them up, they actually closed the door and you couldn't actually use the SDK anymore. But of course, what Apple are producing now is called the AR kit. And that really is the engine from Mateo. And they've got some really wonderful things that they're actually adding to it. I think one of the best things that they've added to it is really markerless position, because for a long time now, there's only been a couple of SDKs that have handled really good markerless position, so that if you put something, a figure or say a chair or something in your field of view, and you want it to stick there and there's no tracker on there, you actually want something that's actually going to stick very well. And that's probably one of the best things that they've actually done. It works really superbly well. But the phone, I think, when it actually comes out, is going to be, they're not just going for the AR market, they're going for the VR market as well, because I think just because they can. And one of the things that it's going to do, it's going to really boost the market for anybody working in AR and VR. Because just in the same way that when Google announced Google Glass, well, that Google Glass technically isn't augmented reality, everybody says it was. And of course, it got lots of publicity and got everybody really excited and, wow, this is going to be the next big thing. And that boosted what was happening in the AR space. The same thing's going to happen with Apple, because now they've decided to get into AR and VR space, they're going to put the whole weight of Apple behind it. They're going to put the whole weight of their marketing division. But also, they have stores. They have about 450 stores around the world. And those stores are actually going to be places where people can go in and they can be taught actually how to use AR and VR well. So I think that's going to be a really good marketing ploy for them as well. So we're going to see that's actually going to happen. I believe the phone's going to be announced in September, and I believe it'll be available in October or November. They definitely want to get it out there before the Christmas market. How many units do you think they've reckoned on selling for the new phone in the first quarter? How many millions? Anybody? Not a lot. Well, they're going to say they're going to shift between 70 and 80 million phones in the first quarter. And that's iPhone 8, yes. That's what they're banking on.
All the rumors are that it's going to be very short use.
Well,
hold on a second. Before this turns into debate, we need to make sure that the internet can hear you so that they know what the debate is.
No, I'm just saying, I don't want to, because there's the most, I think the rumors that there are is there going to be 7S and a 7S Plus, which are going to ship in the quantities you say. But a lot of birds in the Apple atmosphere also say that Apple can never ship enough of the iPhone 8 Plus, as you mentioned it, because there's just no enough production of OLED screens and a lot of the technology that goes in it, and they're also saying that the price is probably going to be $1,200, $1,300, which quite limits, I think, the first year to 1 or 2 years the audience.
No, absolutely, and up until quite recently, that's what I was hearing as well. But just recently, they've got very bullish about what they're going to be doing with the 8.
Of course, I will remind the gentlemen having this debate, this is all theory and it's all hypothetical. Just saying.
Well, it's what we've heard from, sort of facts.
I'm not saying either of you are right. I'm saying it's all hypothetical. Moving on.
Yes. Yes. As we all know, that when you put it together, just think of the amount of components within a smartphone. There's literally thousands of components. And it only takes one glitch, as Samsung found out with a glitch on the battery, and all of a sudden, all your plans go up in smoke, literally. So that could happen. So we're never actually really going to know until we say, right, okay, it's out there. For sure, that I know that a lot of people are already gearing up to be first in line to try and get the 8 Plus, because although it's very expensive, in America it's easier to buy because they have a lot better sort of phone packages you can get out there. Remarkably cheap to actually buy a package from sort of the Verizon and suppliers like that, much cheaper than the UK. So it actually, even then, they are quite happily paying $10 to get services that we pay probably 30 to 40 pounds over in the UK to get.
Just to say my experience from America is that you pay a smaller rate, but you don't get the phone, whereas in the UK, what you pay, you also get to keep the phone after 2 years.
Can you repeat the question?
Well, yes. So the question was in his experience that people get to keep the phones in America, but the problem is, but really, the new technology is going ahead so fast. Do people really want to keep phones these days? I don't think so. I think most people now can't wait for the next phone to come out and swap over and just keep it going. Samsung are experimenting, I know it's not phones, but Samsung are experimenting now with something where in actual fact you don't have to ever buy a television, not outright. You actually enter into agreement with them and they give you a television and you pay them something each month, and when the new television comes out, they just swap it over, and every year or 2 years you get a brand new Samsung television set. Yeah, which I think is going to be sort of quite... So, moving on, the 8 Plus. It's something which I think is going to be fantastic news for anybody working in AR and VR. We can't wait to get it out. We've experimented with the AR kit. It's a fantastic piece of SDK, so we can't wait to sort of get more onto that. Now, I think this is going to put, if they can get the 8 out there and the 8 Plus out there, and it is as good as the early reports are, then they've got a significant advantage over all the other phone manufacturers. Will that advantage continue? Probably not, but I think they'll have first mover advantage. A couple of things that actually are very important for AR is the actual sensor devices, so you know where you are, so you can overlay things. The phone has 2 cameras. And obviously, when they brought out 2 cameras for the 7, it was always about, it's actually going to be, we put the cameras in there because we want to make it usable for electronic zooming. No, that was just a smoke screen. The cameras are actually in there to actually get depth sensing, and they do it very well. So they've given that ruse. That's actually what the 2 cameras are for. But in between the 2 cameras, there's a laser device, which is actually scanning everything that it sees. So you've got another way of actually depth sensing what's in the room, and also to a far greater degree in front of you with the laser. And the great thing about the laser is that it takes up a fraction of the battery life than the cameras do as well. So it's a very smart piece of technology. It's as good as Google Tango, But Google Tango is very good, and companies like Occipital are doing very similar things. But so far, Google Tango is only available in one phone in the whole world, and that's a Lenovo phone. It's about to be joined by an Asus phone, but that's 6 months late. So they've lost the advantage, because the Google Tango, again, was using, actually looking at things in 3 dimensions as well. So if I'm working in AR, one of the things I want to do is actually, and I want to position things correctly, and also I want to size things correctly, because to a large degree, the AR kit will size things as well. It'll know the size of this room, it'll know the size of the desks and the chairs, and if I put a model of somebody here, it'll make a pretty good approximation of how big that model should be, how big that person should be within inside the room. Or if it's a teacup on a table, how big that teacup should be. So I think that's actually quite a smart thing to do, as I say. But I also heard on a couple of rumour mills that Google have got a lot of things in the pipeline, and there's a lot of very smart people in China doing some very smart things with phones. And producing phones, to be quite honest, that are a fraction of the cost of the phones from other manufacturers like Apple and even Samsung. So I expect to see China coming into this in a big way. I think the Chinese market's going to be much more dominated by virtual reality to start off with, because I think they're all in on virtual reality at the moment. But I think that once they see what they can do with the smartphone 8, I think we're going on to that case where it's going to be, okay, all bets are off, they're going to go into AR as well. So that's my sort of overview. But the one thing that we should take away from this is that AR and VR isn't going away. It's actually going to get bigger, it's going to get better, and each quarter that goes by, new things are going to come out that are going to make our life as developers and people that actually make actual VR content and AR content a lot better. And it's going to make everybody's lives easier and also more interesting, because not only, I suppose I should touch on it a little bit, because the one thing they are rumoured to have made is actually a set of Apple glasses. Now, I'm told that it's actually sort of quite stripped down. They are truly AR glasses, but they're pretty unsophisticated. Unsophisticated in terms of the daiquiri glasses, for instance, but it's their first step on the way. For instance, it doesn't have a camera, because they don't want to go down the same problem route that Google had with Google Glass. But it does have sensors, and it does put stuff on the glass. And I've seen some designs. If those are the designs that have come out, then they've done the usual thing with Apple, that whatever they make, whatever it does, it actually does look pretty sensational. So those are the type of things which I think people are going to grab into. And I don't think that, I think probably most people, let's say a lot of people, a lot of consumers would be very happy to wear a branded piece of Apple on their heads, on their face. So I think that's one of the reasons that Apple are probably going to succeed, certainly in the short term. But they're going to drive the market to start with, but then they're going to pull everybody else along as well. So that's my thoughts about where hardware in AR and a little bit of VR is going to go. So any more questions that I might be able to try and answer? Ken?
Hold on, Ken. Patience.
I too have been triangulating on a lot of this AR stuff, and I think you're absolutely right. It's a jump start for AR. You mentioned VR.
Yeah.
Where do you see the advantage, sustainable advantage that Apple can, what can they put there that actually makes the iPhone better for VR?
I think, well, first of all, it's the screen. I mean, I think that's the one big thing that they needed to upgrade to make VR sort of really work for them, because the screens that they have at the moment just don't cut it. So I think that's the one big thing.
But others can do that, can't they?
Oh yes, yeah. But again, it's allying. As I say, it's allying the brand. It's allying. You know, Apple have got so much money. Apple have got more money than most countries in the world stuck away in bank accounts all over the world. if they really wanted to do a big marketing push, to be quite honest, if they really wanted to give away any of these free, they could give away these things to people for free, just to make money on the apps and the other things, if they really wanted to. So by hook or by crook, they're going to make sure that this stuff is out there and people know about it and also know how to use it and can see what's going to happen in the next few years. They're going to make people want to have AR and want to have VR for sure.
Wonderful. So we're going to wrap it there because if you have other questions, you can catch Steve at the end when we're all playing with toys. So thank you to Steve. Rob is heading down. He's going to do a quick interchange with his laptop. In the meantime, what I was going to do is very briefly show you something that I saw recently, which I thought was quite interesting, which is Merge Cube. Has anybody seen the Merge Cube yet? Show of hands? No? Check this out. It's actually really fun. It's really interesting. So it's a physical cube that's using AR markers, essentially, and it can be utilized with any goggle headset along with any mobile phone. So you don't have to have, goggles on your head, but you can also just, use your mobile phone. And they've got some really interesting little things that they're mapping onto. In talking about the Merge Cube, sorry, whilst all this is going on, in talking about the Merge Cube, I also should rightly point out to you that I found out about Merge Cube because of this, which is the virtual reality games and entertainment extravaganza. If you have not been viewing this, show of hands, anybody heard about this? Woo, one person. So this is a conference that's been happening online. Charlie Fink and the team at VR Voice have been running this for the last 5 days. It's all online. So basically, they will have a panel which is starting in literally a couple of seconds. They've been going for 4 days now. Big conference online. You can just log on, view the video feeds. You can ask questions live. So on the right-hand side there, you can see the box. That will fill up as more people start asking questions. You can actually still register for this event, and you can actually watch back the last 4 days' worth of content. So if you want to look at some of the older videos, see some of the cool stuff they've been showing, including things like the Merge Cube, you can find that actually on their website. So feel free to go and check that out. Rob, are you all done? Are you ready?
I'm just trying to work out is this what I'm plugging into here?
You can plug into that there, yes, or you can plug into HDMI.
I think this will work.
So for the eagle-eyed folks in the room, you may have noticed, it's actually quite well hidden. In the back corner, we have HTC Vive set up, which again, you will get to play with later on, once Rob has finished explaining to you why he has a HTC Vive sitting up in the back. Did you manage to figure it out yet? Is it working?
I think so, hopefully.
Okay.
Here we go.
There we go.
Right, guys, I'm going to have to hover over here because the cable's not very long.
Click you on. Just nod.
Okay. So I didn't actually know I was going to be presenting until I got here tonight, so I've just sort of edited a quite quick presentation that I already had, so bear with me. Basically, I work for Reality 01. We're trying to build a platform that makes it easy to take real-world objects and turn them into 3D models in an automated fashion. So for any of you familiar with photogrammetry, that's like the core technology that we use. And we're basically trying to sort of speed up the whole process and create a platform to allow you to do that. So if Tony just wants to kick on, if you press 3 times, you should get 3 little, yep. So we were recently selected as one of the Augmenting companies with Seed Camp and Digital Catapult. So that's one of our sort of feathers in our cap that we recently sort of added to the company. Also, Y Combinator Founders Track Remote Mentoring Scheme, and then we just recently got £250,000 worth of Azure credit from Microsoft, which is great, hopefully for you guys, because that's our biggest cost, and what it's going to allow us to do in the short term is provide a lot of sort of free demos and sort of processing on our cloud platform. So if we kick on, this is the team, some of the brands that we've worked with in the past. If you just kick on, So the main problem at the moment is it's really complex, it costs a fortune, and it takes forever to actually do reality capture. So the next slide should give you a bit of a taste of the complexity involved. So you can see there's a lot of kit, sort of manual setup, really, you can see the guys turning the turntable manually. Bigger sort of rigs, as you see there, are sort of only really within the realms of sort of Hollywood budgets. Once you've actually done the capture and you're into the processing stage, you can see there's a lot of manual cleanup, so there's lots of clicking and requirement for a skilled 3D artist usually to get involved. Once you've got some sort of mesh into the engine, quite often within an immersive environment, using traditional techniques for sort of doing this kind of thing, you don't really get the detail in the geometry. So a lot of techniques that might be used for 2D sort of gaming sort of workflows, when you've actually got stereo, they sort of fall apart. You end up with textures that look like wallpaper on the geometry. So part of our process is providing the hardware that allows you to capture the detail of that. So if we kick on, so really the current landscape's quite fragmented. On the capture sort of side of stuff, you've got bespoke studios, quite low-end desktop stuff. On the processing side of things, you've got quite expensive desktop computers that require very expensive graphics cards. There's a couple of cloud-based solutions, Autodesk's probably the most obvious. And then on the simulation end, there's very few people actually taking reality capture and providing a way to get stuff that you've captured from reality easily into the sort of various platforms and engines. So how are we going to change it? Well, we want to try and provide a solution in each of those three boxes that were sort of fragmented before. So the automated capture, we have currently Alpha Scanner, which is our Clone 1 Pro, which you'll see a picture of in a minute. That's quite a low-cost piece of hardware that does a little bit of pre-processing and computer vision, sends images up to our cloud replication engine, where we do some more pre-processing of the images, and then we sort of put them through the reconstruction pipeline. And then the final part of our platform, I guess the third product almost, is providing an automated way to stream objects from what kind of becomes your content management system for your objects into the various engines. So we're starting with Unreal Engine, looking to also integrate with Sketchfab's API for 2D integration. And of course, as Steve mentioned, with ARKit, that's now become very sort of high on our priority to sort of integrate with that. So if we kick on, this is a picture of the current version of the scanner. If you go up to the back, you'll see we've actually got an even newer version, which is like open-sided, and that's basically for a job that has objects that won't fit on this scanner, which has got a limit of about 50 centimeters in diameter. If we kick on, this shows you it in action. Most of this stuff now you wouldn't see. This happens behind the scenes. So this is a bit of the computer. This is a visualization of a lot of the code. So this is some of our pre-processing. This is the point cloud that comes straight out. So no artist cleanup. That's 20 million points for the pumpkin. And you can see that's a skull that we've done for the Natural History Museum. Again, the pumpkin. This is, we've got like a retop engine. So we do all of this in Docker containers in the cloud. So we have a little sort of process for automating, taking your high resolution mesh and spitting out something that's optimized for high-end HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, and then also Gear VR and Daydream. So this is aspirational because we are an alpha, in alpha at the moment, and this is kind of where we'd like to see things. So if you kick through this is where we'd like to see things in a year or two once we've been able to automate all the things. Some of the things are still, sort of very alpha at the moment. So the idea is to keep the hardware cost very low, possibly even open source it, have a very, very low price per job, and then do sort of revenue shares on the sort of tools that we will provide to allow people to generate content in immersive environments. So this central bit is not just about the replication, it's about being your content management system for your 3D object. And so we envisage a situation where we can use like JSON data feed to procedurally generate virtual environments in the various engines. So this would all run on a sort of hybrid sort of SaaS hardware SaaS solutions, so there'd be a monthly cost as well. This is kind of just a sort of quick overview of how we might roll out. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. If there's any investors in the room, we are trying to raise a pre-seed round at the moment. SEIS, EIS registration is in the post. So if we kick through that, with the funding, we're looking to sort of kick on from what is effectively an alpha to a beta, so addressing all of those sort of 4 points and continuing to work with partners. We've just done a big job for a transatlantic airline. We've got lots of inbound sort of queries, spoken to a rather large TV company today, and have another job in the pipeline for a large animation company as well. So that's us. If you want to come and check out the demo, we've got some Henry Moore, unseen Henry Moore maquettes. So if any of you don't know who Henry Moore was, he was probably our most famous sculptor, and I was lucky enough through, if we kick, I think we've got one last.
That is the last one.
Oh, is it? Well, there should be a thank you to Nathan Shepherd, there we go, who provided the Henry Moore sort of art. His father was Henry Moore's assistant, so it's kind of like I think it's the second or third time we've shown this. So that's it. That's me. Thanks. Any questions?
If you do have questions, I'm going to say save them, because we need to go offline for the live stream that's happening at the moment. Okay. You can check out the stuff up front, or you can check out the stuff out back. Try not to clamber over each other, one at a time. What I will say is thank you to our online audience, and also Steve. Somebody on YouTube wants to know if you work for Apple. Just saying, just saying. But otherwise, everybody, thank you very much for coming. We'll look forward to seeing you next month. And remember, once again, we have VR Drive happening on Friday, and we have the VR Writers Room happening on the 8th of September, and Steve has his PwC event on the 10th of August. He thinks it's the 10th. But thank you very much, guys.